Okay, now you can see here, this one is flashing. See that? This is why I wanted it to flash. I was like, I'm so unconscious about what I'm doing, man. I need this thing that goes like this. Like, yep, we are now broadcasting live. If I could have a big red light that flashes up on the ceiling. That's actually a really good idea. A smart light. Yeah, exactly. I don't know if the ring lights are not smart or controllable, unfortunately. But the big one is. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll have it flash with some kind of pattern. There you go. Okay. Yeah, I've got a few IoT devices laying around, ESP32 and a Raspberry Pi and an Arduino. Yeah. IoT was really big at Camp JS this year. So, what I discovered about myself while I was coding. So, I would be like there coding, and I'd code for a couple of hours, and I'd kind of be like, oh man, okay, I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to have to go away and think about this. Then what I did when I first started streaming is I would watch the stream, because I'm like, okay, what does it look like? How does it sound? Do I need more compression? Does the volume levels need to go up or down? And then I'd be watching it, and I'd see myself copy a line from somewhere and paste it somewhere else. I'm refactoring. I'm not just copying and pasting code. Refactoring. And I wouldn't change the name of a variable or something. And then I would continue coding, and then like sometime later, I'd run into some problem and be trying to diagnose it, but the actual cause of it was like way back here, and I'd missed it happening. But when I watched the stream, I could see it happening. And I was like, that's why that went wrong. Then I'd go off on these tangents trying to debug stuff, and then I started to wonder to myself, like, because what had happened by that stage is I'd solved the problem another way. And then I was thinking to myself, am I able to see what I did wrong because I've gone away and thought about it and solved the problem another way, and now I'm going back and looking at it? Or would I be able to do something like code on Twitch for 10 or 15 minutes, stop, review the footage, and then continue coding? Would that increase my productivity? Like being able to get more kind of reflection or analysis of what I was doing while I was doing it. So that was the first thing that kind of I started thinking about and looking at. Like, it's kind of like watching yourself performing the work rather than just being there performing the work. And then what I noticed after that was that I would be sitting there for like long periods of time just going, and I was just like, this is not compelling viewing, man. Like, I'm competing with Netflix here. People are not going to want to watch this. So I was like, okay, what I got to do is I got to keep talking. Otherwise, people will tune out, right? So I had to start, like, talking to make it interesting viewing. And I watched other people streaming. Has anyone here watched Twitch, streaming on Twitch? Okay, a few people. So gamers who are streaming on Twitch, man, when my son's watching someone there, I'm like, dude, can you, like, turn that down? Because they'll be, like, screaming, yelling, the whole thing. People who are coding, some of them are pretty eccentric. There's one guy who's writing a Commodore 64 game in assembly. Someone else who does like IoT stuff, bunch of different things on there, but they're all kind of like out there in some way. So I was like, okay, I got to keep talking. So what I started doing was like talking myself through things. And how many people have heard of rubber ducking? So rubber ducking is like you get blocked or stuck on something. So what you do is you grab a rubber duck and then you explain the problem to the rubber duck. And a lot of times you'll discover the solution to the problem as you're explaining it to the duck. So that's called rubber ducking. So I started doing basically like rubber ducking while I was coding. Then after a while, what I noticed was that I was no longer just talking about the coding that I was doing. I started talking about what kind of mood that I was in while I was doing it. I was like, because I'd be like really stuck on something, and then I'd just be like, oh, you know what? I'm feeling frustrated with this right now, because why do they have to keep changing the API to this thing? Like, this is just ruining my life. And I was like, well, you know, that's just the price of progress. They could either keep everything the same or they could keep innovating it. And so I started like reflecting on my mood that I was having at the time, and I noticed how the mood that I was in was affecting my ability to program. And then what I discovered from that was that whenever I was in like a mood of being frustrated, and especially if I hadn't had enough sleep, if I was frustrated, and then I was having an experience of like, there is something wrong with this, because after a while of doing it, I gave a talk at Coder Academy, and I got up there and I said, look, I've been programming for like 35 years, and I've got no idea what I'm doing. Like, I'm a guy who cuts and pastes code from the internet for a living. That's what I do. Biggest problem I've had with these alternate keyboard layouts is that Control-C and Control-V and Control-X are fully optimized for the QWERTY keyboard, man. They were invented after all this other stuff, right? So you switch to an alt layout and suddenly you're like trying to find like Control-X over here somewhere and Control-V. That's one of the biggest problems I have in life. Macros, yeah. I have actually done that now with Karabiner. That was my solution to it. But I didn't even know what I was talking about. Coder Academy. So I was at Coder Academy and I was just saying, look, what happens for junior developers is you go into work somewhere and you have no idea what you're doing. And I'm here to tell you that I have no idea what I'm doing. After having been programming for so many years, like the programming languages I started with are no longer in use professionally, and the one that I'm programming in now didn't even exist when I started. And it keeps getting invented all the time. I'd really love to do something in Flutter, but I don't have the time to do it, because I'm like, if I dive into that thing, man, I'm going to be like back at ground zero again with no idea what I'm doing. Do I want to do that to myself? So I just write everything in Node and JavaScript. But for a junior developer, their experience of life is the same as my experience of life, but the difference is that they think that there's something wrong with that. They're like, oh, no one else is feeling this, like it's just me, and everyone else knows what they're doing. And I noticed that even for myself, after having programmed for so long, when I'm sitting there and I'm frustrated, and I add to that the idea that there's something wrong, that there's something wrong with this experience, that it shouldn't be this way, that they shouldn't change the APIs, they shouldn't do this, they shouldn't do that. Why did I ever choose to program in this framework? What was I even thinking? Like questioning my life choices, right? Like, why am I even on Twitch? Like, this thing doesn't work. I just wasted an hour trying to get this button to flash. Like, what am I doing with my life? Like, as soon as I started to like say that out loud, and then got to the point where I was like, you know what? It's just part of a human being's experience of life to feel like this. Especially, Alvin Toffler talked about it in his 1972 book, Future Shock. He said that in the future, the rate of change is accelerating so much that what people will be dealing with is future shock. They'll be dealing with like the disruption of society, economy, technology, and it will just like overwhelm them emotionally. And I was just like, yeah, okay, that's just the milieu that I live in, and this is just what it is to be a human being in 2019. There's nothing wrong with it, folks. It's perfectly fine. If you're feeling it yourself right now, you should know that you're right on track. And as soon as I did that, it would disappear, and then I could again focus on what I was coding on. And so what I realized out of that is this thing that so many of us grapple with, that we call imposter syndrome. My discovery about imposter syndrome for myself is what it actually is it's an experience that there's something wrong. First of all, I'm frustrated, plus there's something wrong here. And then you add on top of that, like, no one can find out. Because if they do, they'll know that I'm a complete fraud and that I don't know what I'm doing. That's why I'm always just upfront about it. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm a guy who cuts and pastes code off the internet, and I know how to use Google, and that's pretty much my development credentials. And that was something that I got a lot more freedom around from being on Twitch and having these people in front of me and having to keep saying something, otherwise they're going to tune out. Nobody's watching it, but they will in the future, right? And it's like, that stuff is on YouTube, it's going to be there forever. Millions of people are watching this in the future. So to you, I say that what I discovered about imposter syndrome was that's what it is for me. A mood of frustration, plus it shouldn't be this way. Some kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing in there as well, and then nobody should find out about that. And then once that nobody should find out about that gets on top of that thing, it's imposter syndrome. And then I'm living in fear that someone will find out that I don't actually know what I'm doing. So I got a lot of freedom around that from like that process of verbalizing it while I was streaming it on Twitch. If people get one thing from my Twitch streams, and that is that it's okay to not know what you're doing and to be frustrated about things, I think that is a powerful key to being a better developer regardless of all the technical stuff, because that's all going to change, right? All those languages, frameworks, patterns, processes, they're all going to change over time. But just getting that human experience of being frustrated, not knowing what you're doing, and that there's nothing wrong with that, and it's okay to say it when it's happening. So that is how Twitch made me a better developer. I did. That's when I changed the name of my channel to Alt Super Meta, because I was streaming it and I was like, dude, this is super meta, man. Like, because I was modifying the stream through the programming that I was doing on the stream, and it was like, now you can see it. It's down the bottom. It was pretty cool. And then I was like, dude, this is like so meta. It's like, and then there are lots of Twitch streams that are about Twitch streams of people programming how to have utilities to do Twitch streams. Jared was telling me about his personal projects that he's like, I do this kind of review of everything that happened in the week, and like 20% of that time turns into like building tools to do the review of what happened in the week. It's like anything as a developer that you work on, you turn into like some kind of automation, of the thing that you're doing. Let me show you. This is the very last thing for this thing here. This is the next level, is the workflow of how I do the stream. So I do the stream. When I press the stop streaming button, it creates these tasks, because I figured out that I've got to go and set a thumbnail. I've got to add the video to a YouTube playlist and then tweet out a link to that. So that's the next part that I'm automating. I've got it where I can click a button and tell people that I'm streaming, and then when I click stop stream, it kicks off this workflow, and then there are like these tasks, and I'll put APIs to make them all happen automatically. Alt Super Meta. So yeah, the answer to that is yes.
Can I have another one?
You can.
Is there actually much of an appetite for this thing? I mean, I don't know much about streaming at all, but I imagine lots of kids are watching streaming games and stuff like that. But is there much of an appetite for people sitting there for hours and watching other people code?
Have you seen that South Park episode about kids watching other kids playing games? You haven't seen that? Yeah, there was a South Park episode a few years ago about because there's Cartman and I can't remember any of the other guys' names. Kyle. And then there's the little kids. And so there's this one episode where the kids are like the old people, and then the little kids are all watching people streaming games, and Cartman and the others are like, what? This is stupid. Why are you watching other kids playing games? Why don't you play games? Like the parents are like, why don't you stop playing games and get out of the house and go and play? And then they're like, what are you doing just watching other kids playing games on streams? Why don't you play games yourself? So the answer to that question is yes, there's a huge appetite. Most of it in the future for my channel. Famous. It's just automatic.
Just the ratio of creators to viewers is orders of magnitude, whereas on like Facebook and Twitter and stuff, everybody's creating.
Right. There you go. And nobody is coding on TikTok. I mean, people are coding on Twitch, but the real question is there an appetite for coding on TikTok?
Well, if you've ever watched a tutorial video on YouTube about how to do a thing, use a tool, whatever, this is the same thing but interactive, because you can go and ask questions, you can use the chat window, and they'll actually sit there and talk back to you. So there's some obvious appetite in terms of that, in terms of upskilling and stuff like that as well. Yeah, it's a lot. I think it's a lot more entertaining than Stack Overflow. Not as many kudos, I guess.
That's how you have your viewing.
There was one other question at the back there.
What are the sort of performance implications of running OBS and coding on the same machine? Like, do you find they interfere with each other at all, or does the stream have issues when you're building something or anything like that?
Not really. I mean, it does go up to like 30% or 30% of. Actually, the OBS can sometimes like show up in here as like 132% utilization of one CPU. I don't know if that's a thread or a core or whatever it is. But, I mean, it works. It runs hot and you wouldn't want to do it on battery, but it doesn't slow anything down for me. But I'm running like an i9 with 32 gigs of RAM. So, I don't know if I'd try it on like, something with 4 gigs or 8 gigs of RAM and a slower processor. Your mileage may vary. Yep.
All right.